So it's the 5th of February at 9:43 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're in some decent drawdown, ranging from 9 to about 11%. Now, I went into this telling everybody that there was potential for 20 to 25% drawdown when things got a little rough. And right now we're at 11%. And I don't see anything telling us that what we have going right now is going to change. So I guess what I foresee is potential for a bit higher drawdown here. And we could hit potentially that 20% that I have thought could come. Now, this is the highest drawdown that I've had in the last 3 months, over 3 months. The highest drawdown I had before that was just over 9.5%. And right now, I just hit a total of about 11% is the highest, 11.23%. Okay, so it's definitely a manageable drawdown, especially when trading is considered and how much profit that we're shooting for each month. You can see all of our positions that are in right now. And typically when this happens, I get chastised by traders that like the trend trade. Traders that don't agree with what I'm doing. They like to typically pick on me during these times of drawdown, because it looks a little bit ridiculous when you have this many trades in on one side and the market continues to go against you. And right now, the reason why the market is going against me is the current issue with tax in regards to aluminum and steel coming from Canada. Now, Canada reportedly gives the U.S. 90% of their aluminum and steel, or a good portion of it, and so this is causing big issues for the Canadian dollar on every single pair, pretty much. So there is potential for a NAFTA agreement, which Trump is hoping will be worked on soon. And if that changes, if an agreement is met, then that should help the Canadian dollar. But right now, there's not a lot of news or anything that's going to stop the bleeding. When this happens, sometimes I can get stuck in the middle of something like this, where it's random, unannounced news that happens that causes turmoil on a currency pair, either the CAD or whatever pair that we're trading. Sometimes it can be the pound, sometimes it can be the Aussie dollar, and it can sometimes it can be the Canadian dollar. The Canadian dollar has been taking a hit ever since this has been announced. It's also been struggling a bit with when it comes to the official news statements that have been coming out. Uh, like for example, we have some news coming out on the 7th for the Canadian dollar, which is the bank statement, and the trade balance. So even these scheduled news announcements, the Canadian dollar has been getting hit pretty hard. And so we need some love on the 7th so in the next couple days, something to help the Canadian dollar, something to give investors a reason to buy back on the Canadian dollar, because right now everybody is selling it, and there's no reason to really do otherwise. So you might be wondering, well, if we're only at 10% drawdown, why not take a 10% loss now? Uh, the reason for that is anything can change in a second. An agreement could be met within the next few seconds for NAFTA, and that would cause the Canadian dollar to push down really quickly and abruptly if an agreement was met, and that could come at any point in any time. Uh, and so, with that being said, I think it would be dumb to close out positions when there is a potential agreement on the table, or anything can change. Especially considering that we're only at 20% drawdown 10% drawdown at the moment. And so I don't think that it's a good enough reason to really close out positions yet. Now, I do have stop loss in place, and you can see that where they are above here. We'll start taking losses up there if price does happen to go that far, which it's not too close at this point. It's about our price is currently, we're still about 266 pips or 260 pips from starting to take losses on our trades. So we still have a decent amount of room, and those losses will come at right around, probably start taking losses at about 25 or so percent. So that is the time where things start to change for us, where we either start considering taking losses at that point, or potentially things will hopefully move around and we'll start moving into profit around that time. I don't know if price will reach another 250 pips. I don't think, unfortunately at this point, I don't think it's unlikely that that could happen, considering the current state of the Canadian dollar and what's going on. It has already extended a lot since this whole thing really began. 250 pips on the pound Canadian dollar is pretty substantial. But don't remember that we're also dealing with another pair here, with another currency. So we're not just talking about the Canadian dollar. Yes, the Canadian dollar is in a very poor position right now, but we also need to consider the pound. The pound has been in a bit of a range in this for a while now, and it actually hasn't been doing that great. I mean, recently it's been moving down, but since the beginning of the week, it's been slightly bullish, uh, and that hasn't been helping us that much. If this all of a sudden pushed down a lot, then that would help our current placement on the pound Canadian dollar. So we need a little bit of love on the pound as well to help the situation that we're currently in. So this could affect the pound, which is a speech that's coming out at 1:15 tomorrow. But there's nothing today that's showing us that things will change. I mean, this also didn't help. The PMI data being positive, yeah, that's going to cause the pound to increase as well. All right, so going back to our current positions, yeah, just over about 11% drawdown. Now, you guys shouldn't be too worried yet. This is somewhat normal to happen. These unannounced news statements that come out and are random. And as I've mentioned before, that the markets are constantly changing. This is something different. Trump has caused with these tax issues coming out of Canada with steel and aluminum. This is something different. This is something that hasn't happened in a long time. And it's causing different price behavior on the pound Canadian dollar. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad thing for us, but it just means that there is potential drawdown in the future, and my system tries to handle this drawdown as best as possible. And we're ready for for a pullback to happen where price is currently, and we need it to fall. And we need it to fall not too much. That's why we have so many positions in. That's why we position ourselves like this with our trades pretty close together. It's because when the price does start to move in our direction, we don't need the pullback to be very substantial. We don't need it to go all the way back to our original position in order for us to take profit. We need it to go roughly just over halfway. So right probably in this area, maybe a little bit less depending on what the trades are doing on the New Zealand Canadian dollar. So if this starts pushing back and if the Canadian dollar gives us starts pulling back or starts gaining in value, then this will pull back as well, and both of our trading pairs will move in the profitable direction, which means we don't need as much of a pullback in order to take profit on our two pairs. Now, sometimes when this happens, I will have manual intervention to the expert advisor, and I may end up pulling an additional profit. I like to do this sometimes because a small amount of pullback or a small amount of pushback down means that our profit and loss are affected uh, in a big way. So when the market moves up against us, this number changes pretty quickly, and when it goes down for us, it changes pretty quickly as well. So in reality, the pull back down to where we need to be, I might extend that a little bit more because only a small amount of price movement is needed in order to take additional amounts of profit. And so I sometimes will postpone profit taking in order to take a bit more pips on the positive side in uh, a market type of movement like this. Um, so hopefully you guys can understand that I like to try to get a bit more profit when we're in higher drawdown to make it a little bit more worth it. And I'm not saying that in this case I will do that, but it's something that I'll basically be watching the markets and how they're doing to see if a bit more profit can be squeezed out. And so typically in a situation like this, we'll be looking for anywhere from zero point 0.3 to 1% profit. So I think that 0.3% being the lowest amount that we'll take from here, and maybe 1 to even 1.5% profit on is what we could maybe expect if I do extend, maybe a bit more, I don't know. But this is something that I will play by ear. But if I think that it's important for us to get out earlier rather than later, uh, then I might just close out things at break even. But it just depends on what we're getting from the market and how it changes over the next few days. So again, this is normal for me. This is expected. As I have mentioned before, that 20 to 25% is a possibility, and I did see my system going in that direction at some point, and it did show potential for that drawdown in my testing. It doesn't happen very often. This isn't something that you can expect all the time. As mentioned before, the highest drawdown that I've received was back in December 13th to be exact, which I received 10% drawdown before things started moving in my favor. Will that happen again? I don't know. Will it start turning around right now? I don't know. That's the thing, is that we have to be prepared for every situation. And this is why I trade like this, is so I can be prepared and I can allow my positions time to breathe and time to move into profit. And at this point, we haven't had a lot of movement on into the positive area or positivity. All right, we haven't had a excuse me, we haven't had a lot of positivity on the Canadian dollar, and that can change at any given moment. And we also could have some negativity on the pound, which could cause this to move down as well. So this is uh, dual-sided here. We don't just need the Canadian dollar to start gaining in value. We can also have the pound lose value, and this could also have the same kind of pullback effect. All right, I think that is pretty much it for this video. I'm going to release another video tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have a change in what's happened. I do unfortunately expect our drawdown will be higher over until we get maybe some news, or like I said, a reason for the bleeding to stop. But we'll see what happens. Anything can happen in the next 24 hours or 48 hours. I'm currently on the road. As you can see, I'm in a hotel room, and we just had another order that went in, by the way. And we still have a lot of margin, 2,000 margin, 144, $144 drawdown. So we are looking at about 12 to 13% now, and we're just going to hold out and see what happens. Thanks guys for watching, and make sure to try to stay patient. If you have any questions, you can always contact me by email, and hopefully I can try to put out any fear fires if those are happening right now. All right, thanks for watching. Have a good one. Bye.